Hi, and welcome to Trek Talk. I'm Matthew Kahn.
I'm Troy Harper.
And today we're going to be talking about the four captains of the different series. Of course, we're going to start out from Captain Kirk, and we're going to hit Picard, go to Sisko, and then Janeway. We're going to point out their strengths, their weaknesses, some of their little character flaws, some of the good points, of course. We're just going to cover the whole thing. Of course, first captain everybody always thinks of as soon as you say Star Trek is going to be Captain Kirk.
Captain James Tiberius Kirk.
James Tiberius Kirk. Actually, I believe there was a little discrepancy in there, in that the T was actually something else in the classic series. There was the episode Operation Annihilate, where Kirk's brother was killed. Kirk's only brother was killed in a planetary assault of some kind, and his name originally was something else. If I'm not mistaken, I don't quite recall, but it is one and the same. Captain Kirk started out actually the second choice for the Starship Enterprise.
Right. Jeffrey Hunter was originally supposed to play Captain Christopher Pike.
Right.
In the original pilot, The Cage, which anyone who knows anything about Trek knows all about The Cage.
Right. But Hunter decided that wasn't quite the route he wanted to go. And Gene Roddenberry offered the spot to William Shatner. Shatner, of course, hadn't really done anything major before that, not that I'm aware of.
He was big into the live TV scene back in the 50s and early 60s. He was just a kind of a Hallmark Hall of Fame player. I think he did some shows of that. He did Twilight Zone, did some other shows where it was a one-time, one-act drama type thing. And that was his experience in TV.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, he's a Canadian, isn't he?
I believe so.
I think he is. I think he is a Canadian actor. One of the many that kind of pulled down from up north there. Of course, he joins the ranks of Mike Myers, and I believe Jim Brewer's Canadian, and a few others.
They walk among us.
Yes, they do. They certainly do. Now, of course, Kirk was probably the most passionate, I would guess you could say, of all of the captains that they've had thus far. Kirk, although he was very good in command, he had very tight reins, as anybody could see. Kirk was just extremely passionate man. He had a lot of emotion there. He had a great attachment to not only the crew but also the ship itself. In every sense, the classic captain of a vessel, whether spacefaring or ocean-going.
Yeah, a very poetic, I guess you could say, captain. He was the captain of the ancient poetry, and he very very strong ties to his ship, strong ties to his crew, and then you could argue and say Picard's the same way, and he was, but Kirk had, I think he was more associated with his ship, especially since that was the first Star Trek TV show. That was the first Enterprise and everything else that went along with it. He had a very strong attachment with that ship, and if you watch the Search for Spock, Star Trek 3, when he has to destroy the Enterprise to get away, it really kind of breaks him up a little bit.
You could see, even though he gets slammed all the time for his acting, you could see, he's the character Kirk just really falling apart as the ship breaks up and burns up in orbit. It's just a real emotional experience, and everybody in the theater at that point was just like, "Oh no, they blew up the Enterprise! What are we going to do now?
That was sacrilege at the time.
This series is over. It's over."
I remember that it was sacrilege at the time to do something of that nature. Well, it was sacrilege to kill Spock, and now they're destroying the Enterprise. What are these people doing? That's what.
Right. Of course, now it's commonplace.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we've gone through. We're up to the Enterprise E now. And then, of course, there's also the rumor going around that they're going to go ahead and go back and do Sulu on the Enterprise B and kind of rewrite some of Trek history. Just kind of a rumor floating around.
Yeah, do some Trek
history. Kirk's character really was really pretty much the same throughout, I would say. Mm-hmm. From the classic series through all 6 of the or actually 7 of the movies that he was in. Shatner played him equally throughout, I would say, pretty much. Of course, closer to the end, we see him, losing the Battle of the Bulge, and of course, the question about whether that is his real hair or not comes into play. But for the most part, Kirk was always Kirk. Shatner did a fairly good job of keeping Kirk pretty much the same kind of cookie-cut character throughout the whole thing.
Well, the one character flaw you can always point out about Kirk was that he wasn't very grounded. He had a strong tendency to either fall in love or become too emotionally attached to something and lose his ability to command a ship.
Right, and we saw that pretty frequently with episodes in the classic series like Obsession, with the big vampiric cloud that sucked all the blood out of people's bodies. He had encountered that years before as an ensign, and was one of the few survivors for some strange reason, which we have yet to figure out.
We
have yet to figure that one out.
Couldn't get those toupee.
It must have been something about the hairpiece. But he survived that one, and then of course when he comes back in that episode and faces the cloud yet again, he almost destroys the ship and the crew, trying to destroy this cloud entity. You see it several times throughout the one episode where they're all have the radiation sickness and they're aging incredibly fast. Kirk's determined to hang on to his command of the ship, to be the captain, even though his mind's going, and he's the one best part of that episode right there where he's kind of asleep. He's got his eyes closed, and Spock walks up there and tries to talk to him, and he realizes he's asleep, and he nudges him, and he says he was sleeping. Totally in denial that he's losing his ability to command the ship.
Right.
But still determined to stay in control, to stay on top of everything.
Another fine example of that is probably what's considered to be the greatest classic series episode would be City on the Edge of Forever.
Yes.
And Kirk's romance with Edith Keeler, the woman who, as it turns out, holds the key to history. She if she were to survive, she would ultimately lead to the German proliferation of Europe and America's neutrality during the World War II, and she would ultimately lead to the Germans destroying the Earth. And history would be destroyed if Kirk would let this woman live, and he has to battle that and ultimately end up letting her die, which is one of Kirk's that kind of redeems himself on the character flaw a bit. He actually does go through and prevents McCoy from saving her life during the incident when she gets hit by a truck.
Right. He was to me, he was always one of the captains that most frequently had the battle going on. It was always a battle between the right and the wrong. Duty and emotion. It was a constant struggle for Kirk, and as we see, he plays it out. Of course, every time came out on top, right up to the end. Of course, we see that in Generations when Picard comes forward and they're trapped in the Nexus and the ultimate paradise beyond imagination. And of course, Kirk, as soon as Picard tells him that it's fake, you can tell it starts eating away at him.
Right.
And then he jumps that gorge, and then once he realizes that he can do whatever he wants, there's no thrill left. Kirk was the real thrill seeker.
Right.
All the captains.
That's true. That is true.
He, damn the torpedoes straight ahead type character.
And don't ever forget the one thing of any captain of all time. Kirk always got the girl.
Kirk always got the girl. It didn't matter what color her skin was either. He always got the girl.
And we're talking about green skin too. Everything.
Orion slave girls. And he definitely was not a picky person.
No, he wasn't.
He was not a picky person. Now, on the kind of the interesting thing about it is Picard is kind of his opposite.
Right.
And Picard
probably would have been Spock's favorite captain.
Yes, I agree with you.
Picard really approached everything from a logical perspective, and he had those battles too occasionally between emotion and duty, but ultimately he was a wiser person. He had more of a father figure type status
Right, he
on
did.
board the Enterprise D, and it was he very, very seldom approached temptation to ignore his duty, and he was very strong-willed, had almost no compulsion.
Right.
When he did something, he stuck to it. As a matter of fact, in the first part of the series, you find out that he hates children, or he didn't hate children. He just can't deal with children because they're emotionally unstable, and he's not like that.
Right. To me, he seems to be more of the flip side of Kirk, the side
Right.
of Kirk that we seldom see. And like you said before, it just seems that whenever it was a question between emotion or passion and duty, we always knew it was not going to be a problem with Picard. Hands down, duty every time. Of course, Picard, when we see him in his first few episodes with the Next Generation, he's already older than Kirk was. Kirk, of course, being the youngest man to ever hold command of a starship. Picard is definitely not the oldest, but he's many years. It would be many years a senior to Kirk in command of a starship. I think that lends a lot to his feelings of being more more drawn to do his duty, being more duty-minded.
As a matter of fact, mentioning Generations, in Generations, when Picard is trying to convince Kirk to go back with him, Picard has to argue to Kirk, "You're a Starfleet officer." He has to ask, "Don't you know your duty? You're a Starfleet officer."
Right.
And I thought that was kind of funny that Picard was arguing with Kirk about where's your duty, where's your sense of duty.
And it also kind of made sense because Kirk, his entire life, the death of his son, multiple romances, and obviously he never really got himself the wife, or the family or the wife. In fact, in Star Trek V, he made the comment that men like us, we don't have families.
Mm-hmm.
And then Picard is the opposite side. It's not that Picard was ever looking for a family; he just didn't want one. Picard was not a family man, and he emphasized that in Generations whenever his brother brother got married and then had his nephew Rene, that he felt that his obligation to his family was over with because the Picard name would go on. I personally think that's probably one of Picard's biggest strengths was his obligation to his duty.
Right.
I mean, it's just straightforward, no problem. Every time an emotional thing came up, it wasn't a big trouble to Picard.
There's only one time that you see Picard become obsessed, and that's with the Borg. After the Borg had assimilated him and they return for their second attack on Earth, you can see Picard really obsessed with trying to destroy them.
Yes.
And that's in First Contact, of course. And it's a little outside his character, as a matter of fact. But it's kind of funny that the 21st century woman that they pick up has to remind Picard of his duty, and she also, in the Next Generation, you see a lot of, grandstanding, political grandstanding that, we've taken the high road and we're better than you and everything else, and she kind of puts him in perspective. She takes that politically correct attitude and kind of shoves it back at him, and I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, that's something else that was kind of interesting about Picard is with the beginning of the movie we start to see his character kind of shift from duty oriented to a more emotionally charged character, because pretty much throughout the entirety of the series it's Picard and his duty, and there were a few episodes where emotions came into play. The biggest one I can think of right now was when he and Crusher went to this one planet that had two separate factions, two mega factions that were fighting each other, and they got linked by a neural connection at the base of their skull that linked their brains together, so that the aliens could find out all their dirty little secrets or whatever. And he came to find out that Crusher was actually, cared a lot about him and everything, but in the end they decided not to pursue that relationship, those kind of things. They had a few other ones like that just kind of went back and forth. And of course, every time Picard pretty much just kind of pushed the emotional side away from it and took a deep breath and then marched back down the hall to his quarters. But we really begin to see him shift away with that, especially mainly with Generations. Of course, his family is destroyed, so now he kind of gets that little longing. He's got to. I guess he kind of feels the obligation to do something with his family, and then you kind of see him, being a little almost flirtatious for Picard, being a little flirtatious with the lady on the alien planet in the Briar Patch on Star Trek Insurrection.
True. I think one of the things that makes Picard such a strong character, I think, probably the main thing is Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart is a classically trained actor. He's been doing Shakespeare on the stage for dozens of years. I've seen him in science fiction movies. He was in Excalibur, if you can recall.
He played one of the big knights in Excalibur, actually. I believe it was Gawain, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, he also played in Dune.
Dune, yes.
That was probably one of his bigger roles.
Right.
Played one of the. I believe he was a soldier or a general of some type.
Of some type, yeah. He was a military leader.
In the army in Dune, and then he did numerous, many B-rate science fiction films. Life Force. There were a few other ones, but that's it. He was probably one of the only actors that they've ever gotten who was actually very seasoned in other things before he actually came to Star Trek.
Right, and I think that's one of the reasons they picked him is because of his experience in acting. And I think he the role was written, of course, but I think he came in and shaped it and molded it and made it a little more associated with himself. And the character is highly associated with himself.
Very much so. Of course, we start to see that actually quite a bit with all the characters as the series developed, because it kind of took on a life of its own after Roddenberry passed away, and so the characters, or the actors playing the characters, kind of did that. They kind of took on the persona of their character, and we can really see that with my personal favorite captain, who is Benjamin Sisko, captain of the Deep Space Nine station. Now, a lot of original Trek people could not take Deep Space Nine, but for some, and for a while to begin with, I wasn't real hot on it myself, but something drew me to Captain Sisko. For some reason, there's just one thing about Captain Sisko that I could not figure out what it was that was so interesting and so intriguing about him. It's his charisma. More so than Kirk or Picard, he just has this commanding charisma.
He does. He does. I think he has a very deep voice, very pronounced accent, sounds almost, he's a very classic actor, you can tell. He's
very much so. Now Avery Brooks, who plays Benjamin Sisko, did a couple of Roots spin-offs. He was also the mob boss, the head mob boss character in The Big Hit, and he's actually
had a show on ABC for a while called Hawk.
Yes, yeah.
And it was a spin-off of Spencer for Hire, and he played Hawk, Spencer's old sidekick, and they made a spin-off with it. It was his own show for a while.
Yeah, and it did pretty well. He's one of those actors that he takes the role and he can really take off with it. He's very versatile, and I'm looking forward to see him in more movies and television series as time goes on. But what he did with Benjamin Sisko, I think, is really kind of surpassed any of the other roles he's done. We see Benjamin Sisko in the capability. He's a big commander. He could stand up. He stands up, and the entire ops center on Deep Space Nine goes quiet. Everybody's quiet. Everybody's tuning in and listening. But at the same token, when he gets off duty and he goes home and he talks to his son, he's a loving, caring father. He even took time off from running the space station to take his son to the other side of the wormhole to do a special project, so he wouldn't fail in school. Now, out of all of the captains, he is the first captain to have an actual family. His wife was killed at Wolf 359 with the incident with the Borg, when he was a second in command on a star vessel. He is a single father, has his son with him on the station, and so there were many episodes that dealt with the father and son being a single parent, having a job that's extremely demanding, and yet trying to be there for your children, trying to be there for his son at the same time.
Right.
But for Sisko, it seemed pretty simple. He always seemed to be able to tie in, taking care of Jake and defending the Federation from the Founders and their genetically engineered Jim Hadar soldiers.
He fought everyone, the Founders, the Cardassians, the Klingons for a while, occasionally the Romulans.
Everybody.
He took them all on.
He very much did. He took everybody on. I mean, just full force, strong. I mean, in several episodes, you could see the biggest one that comes to mind to me is the first episode. I believe it's third or fourth season, where they brought in the Defiant. The first episode with the Defiant, and they, of course, they were going to take it across the wormhole and test it out. And they had the Romulan cloaking device on there and everything. It was one of the first ones. And of course they get it across, and the power system on the ship was all messed up and whatever. And of course they got found. And they got boarded by the Jim Hadar. Well, we all know that the Jim Hadar are basically the adrenaline-pumped Klingons for all intents and purposes. That was one of the big things I think that the Jim Hadar really wanted to fight the Klingons, because they were a warrior race. Mm-hmm. They wanted to have this big battle. Well, I don't know about the Klingons, but Sisko sure did give them a ride. Sure did give them a run for their money, because Sisko took on 4 or 5 Jim Hadar soldiers by himself and was on top of them for quite some time. I mean, he more than any of the other ones. I mean, we've seen Kirk get into fist fights, and I can't even recall if Picard ever got into an actual fist fight. I know he's been in a few firefights.
Occasionally.
Once in a while, but you see Sisko in almost every single episode when he's off of the station. He's pounding on somebody. Somebody's just got to pick on him because he's so big. They want to see how tough he is, and he gives them a knuckle sandwich, for sure.
So we have Kirk, who's the lover. We have Picard, who's the thinker, and now we have Sisko, who is the fighter.
Definitely.
And so I guess if we move on to Janeway, would she be the nurturer?
I don't know, actually. I think Janeway kind of falls into the mother / champion of justice. She was really kind of a blend of so many different personas. I think it was a real challenge for the actress who played her to really just bring all that together. There was so much she had to do. She was defender of the Star Trek dogma, or the Starfleet dogma. Everything, that they couldn't break the Prime Directive. They couldn't do this. They couldn't hand out the technology for this or that, or the replicator designs, or anything like that.
If you were 70,000 light years from home and you wanted to get home, you would usually find the easiest way to get back.
Right.
And that's one of the things that played into the series pretty well. I mean, you could argue it kind of became a Gilligan's Island in space after a while, but because every episode was the one where they almost got home.
They almost got home,
but
and they never quite made it.
It often came into conflict with the Prime Directive, as the Prime Directive got in the way of the means of getting home, and so there was always this serious conflict. And Janeway always, of course, chose the Prime Directive. And I don't say how you'd be very popular with your crew doing that, but they seem to respect her. I mean, even these in certain cases. I mean, even these what were they called? The
Maquis.
The Maquis.
Right.
They even sort of fell in behind her in most situations.
Yeah, I don't know. Janeway was definitely the defender of the faith. She wanted equality for all, and I think that was probably the big thing. The biggest struggle that she had to deal with was the fact that she had her crew members who, they were trying to follow her orders, but at the same time they're like, man, we don't care. These guys are going to kill themselves off anyway. It's going to take us 60 years to get home. Who cares what we do out here? It's not going to change the shape of the galaxy any. Give them the stuff. Let's go home. Yep. And on the same token, Janeway's thinking, what if just by some odd chance we're actually able to find a way to do this kind of stuff? And, we want to leave a good impression on these people that we, stuck by our guns and all this kind of stuff. Now, personally, I thought Chakotay was a much better commander, lead commander than Janeway was, and I think the Trek fans kind of think so too. I know there's a few die-hard Voyager fans out there, and I'm sure there's plenty of them that love Janeway. But my personal opinion on Janeway. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think Janeway is formidable, but I kind of agree with you. I think Chakotay might take it a little better. I think that her chief engineer, what was her name? The
Klingon.
I think she would be a great commander, actually.
Yes, yeah.
I really do.
It's been that's from the sound of it. It's been so long since either one of us
I know,
have actually watched Voyager.
It has been.
Yeah, well, that's what we get. That's what we get for not having a UPN station here in town.
I agree.
But maybe we should petition, because according to rumor, it's not going to be too long before we actually get a new series, new Star Trek series.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. We're just about out of time. We're running pretty low here. Of course, you've noticed we've kind of changed the decor on the set here. We're trying to get things together. We're going to have a new set before too long. But if you've been watching the show and keeping up with us, we are going to be having a kind of a competition between the series, which is the better series, and we'd like your input on it. So you could write us or email us at our ship's log, which will be popping up, there we go, on the screen. The address for that is ship's log at Lamar University, box 10050, Beaumont, Texas, and that zip code is 77710. Or you can email us if you're on the web. You can email us at trektalklu@hotmail.com. So drop us a line. Give us any questions, comments, anything you have. Any questions or comments that you have for the show, just send them to us. If you have any ideas or anything you'd like to see for a future episode, and just let us know. Email us, write us.
Yeah, let us know. Well, we might put your letter on the air. Might let people know what you think.
If you got a good question, we'll definitely put it on the air.
If you have a strong opinion about the Star Trek, or you have a strong opinion about us, let us know. Let us know.
If you have any input about this show or any of the shows we've done, just write in and let us know. That's about it, all the time we have for today. We want to thank you very much for joining us, and hope that you'll stick around for our next episode. Our next episode is going to be our favorite crew members of all time. All those little guys running around that came up maybe once or twice in the series that you really, really liked, and then kind of some disappeared, some became regular members of the show, some were just the occasional off and on characters, but that's going to be our next episode. Please join us for that, and thank you for watching.
Thanks a lot.